It's been almost 18 years since we originally saw Leon entering the world's worst vacation spot with Resident Evil 4. Since that time, the series has changed drastically, going from an almost pure action to first-person horror and somewhat back again, but nothing quite captured the high point of Resident Evil 4 until now, where it's superseded by itself. This is my spoiler-free review of the Resident Evil 4 remake, and this game proves something incredible to me. A huge shout out to 2game.com for sponsoring today's video, and if you want to pick up Resident Evil 4 remake for yourself, follow the link in the description below as it is on sale at 2game.com, and use code PUNGLES for an additional 5% off. Now let's put on our iconic leather jacket and discover that the real victories are the friends we make along the way. Being a mostly spoiler-free review, most of the footage you will be seeing is from the very beginning of the game, and much like the original, the intro instantly sets the mood, atmosphere, and feeling of tension that never really leaves the player throughout the entirety of the game. Even from the very opening moments of RE4, there's just something off about this place, and I love how it puts Leon and the player completely out of their element and on edge. RE4 wastes no time dropping the player right into the setting and story and action, and I love it for that.
This is it.
This game sees Leon, now an experienced and highly trained special agent, now working for the US government, tracking a lead on the president's kidnapped daughter. It is the perfect B action horror movie setting and premise. Now, why they would send a single agent to track this lead, I'm unsure, but that can be hand-waved away by the US probably not wanting to invade a rural village in Spain, as well as the information of Ashley, the president's daughter's location, not being 100% confirmed. Regardless, shit quickly hits the fan as Leon is attacked by the very first resident that he comes across. After apparently killing the man, Leon finds information leading him to the main village. He's once again attacked by the dead man, and so we jump into the evil part of these residents. Recognizing that this is not a zombie as Leon knows it, he begins investigating what exactly is happening in this rural area, and if it's the same thing he experienced all those years ago within Raccoon City. And so the story kicks off. Despite the entire game taking place in a relatively linear manner, Resident Evil 4 Remake does a fantastic job of mixing up different locations and keeping the environments fresh and fun to explore. Houses, villages, caves, lakes, a castle, all of it is here in beautifully realized detail and care. Really, the entire game has an attention to detail and such care put into it that I think the dev team was pretty much made up of those who all loved the original. Speaking of, the team did an incredible job balancing the different areas and expanding on areas not fully explored within the original. I really appreciate how much they fleshed out some of the more video gamey locations by adding more exploration, items to find, and just overall enjoyment when searching the many different locations. But most importantly, despite the grittier and darker atmosphere, it did not also determine the removal of the cheesy action movie one-liners and dialogue, mostly delivered by the one-man army himself, Leon.
Where's everyone going? Bingo?
I was so happy to see the cheesy dialogue return, and would have rated this an instant 0 out of 10 if it had not. The writing and story were improved for me, especially with Ashley, who went from a bit of a ditzy, whiny kind of brat in the original to a now much more fleshed out and better character. Other story beats and areas that were tweaked and changed were for the better in my opinion, while not completely ignoring or retconning the story of the original. Overall, I absolutely love the setting, tone, and atmosphere in the remake, and it's just as, if not more creepy and fun to explore now than it was back in the day. The first thing to notice, of course, are the enhanced visuals. The graphics in RE4 Remake are absolutely stunning. The attention to detail in character models, environments, and lighting is top-notch, and it really feels like a next-gen experience. But they did it by also preserving the eerie atmosphere of the original, while using the updated visuals to add a level of immersion that's kind of hard to describe. Although it's hard to imagine it now while you look at it, the original actually featured groundbreaking graphics and gameplay elements, and I'm so happy to see visual fidelity pushed forwards even more once again. New cinematic effects and small details really sell me on how decrepit and frankly disgusting this area is due to neglect and the locals' new, let's say, less than hygienic tendencies.
Man, that stinks.
The audio is of course improved, and man, there is something about this engine they've developed that really excels with audio positioning and quality. I noticed it in the RE2 remake, but hearing the whisperings of villagers hiding out of sight, the screaming of the parasitic creatures, the boom of the shotgun, it's all realized here beautifully and creates a rich tapestry of sounds that enhance the experience just as much as the visuals. The soundtrack is excellent, and from what I can tell and remember, largely the same, at least in tone, with the original. Very eerie strings and soft horns enhances the feeling of desperate isolation and danger. Of course, being 18 years after the original, RE4 Remake takes advantage of many leaps and improvements to the standard over-the-shoulder third-person gameplay. While the original was groundbreaking in its design, especially when compared to previous Resident Evil games, the remake doesn't necessarily break new ground, but instead enhances, improves, and polishes what was done before, and I'm completely fine with that. Adding new skill-based moves such as knife parrying, evading, quick slots, and a greater range of movement, Resident Evil 4 is definitely the most fun Resident Evil for me when it comes to gameplay. I was extremely happy to see all the fan favorite weapons return, including my personal favorite, the Red 9. But some new additions I found surprisingly fun, such as the bolt thrower, which is kind of a replacement for the bow gun, but functions as a reusable crossbow you can craft ammo for and get much earlier in the game. Especially on hardcore, I found the bolt thrower extremely useful and versatile in encounters. Enemy types remain pretty similar throughout in the progression from dirty villagers wielding hatchets and pitchforks to the more fantastical and deadly enemies is a great feeling of progression, especially as you upgrade and tune up your weapons to combat these new threats. Most importantly, the shotgun feels just as good if not better than the original. Lots of quality of life improvements were added as well, and some mechanics were more fleshed out, such as weapon upgrades, crafting, and the case systems, which I really appreciated. Things like auto sort are also a huge lifesaver, and overall the gameplay of Resident Evil 4 is by far my favorite of the original series, and I'm happy to say that the remake now surpasses and improves on it for me. While I've seen critiques about how little RE4 Remake changes things up from the original, I just don't really get it. The areas that have been improved and expanded upon are welcome, but even in parts or boss fights that are pretty much one-to-one copies of the original, I found myself enjoying it just as much now as I did way back then. And I think that really speaks to the legacy and excellence of the original more than anything. And this is what proved something incredible to me as I played through this, is really the staying power of Resident Evil 4 even 18 years later. I distinctly would remember parts, and again it was just as much fun, and it was a masterpiece at launch, and I'm so incredibly happy to see the remake capture the spirit and fun of that legacy. I'm by no means a Resident Evil 4 purist, but I really appreciate how much they actually kept the same, especially when it comes to critical elements for me such as tone, atmosphere, and overall enjoyment. I absolutely 100% recommend picking up and playing Resident Evil 4 Remake as soon as you can and give this game an absolute 10 out of 10. It is a fantastic entry to the Resident Evil franchise and really gets me hyped for what Capcom can do next. I hope you enjoyed the video. Again, a huge shout out and thank you to 2game.com for sponsoring it and the channel. Go check them out and get some great games for cheap and support the channel. Win-win for everyone. That's it for me. Until next time.